Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the General Assembly. I'm addressing amendment number 14, which rolls up amendments 10 through 13 on the list. I'm just going to come up here once and save everyone the grief. My amendment accomplishes four things. Number one, the amendment adds a requirement that any teacher must successfully complete firearms instruction, as was alluded to in previous amendments. Number two, the Indiana Safe Schools Fund would not be used to fund this training program. Number three, virtual schools would be excluded from this training program. And number four, any participants in the program must submit to an NICS check, have no history of domestic abuse, any conviction of a violent crime, or illegal possession of a firearm. We think they're simple asks, and I'll go through one by one just real quick and explain why we're asking for those things. Regarding Amendment 1, including teachers and staff in this program kind of shows to me a disregard for the job that our law enforcement does undergo to keep our communities safe. Our first responders, as everyone knows, are highly trained professionals that should be treated as so, but this bill makes it seem like anyone can just go in and do their job after 39.5 hours of training, which I don't believe is the truth. Second, when Representative Paff argued at this very mic just a couple weeks ago that the matching requirement should be eliminated from the omnibus school safety bill for the secured school fund, the reason for defeating that amendment was that the funds are finite and will soon be exhausted. To turn around today and vote this amendment through is a highly hypocritical, since that very same argument can be trotted out from a couple weeks ago and would be applicable today. By lowering the bar to fund mental health professionals in our schools, this is not a good thing for our schools. Regarding Amendment 3, regarding the third part of the amendment, this bill as written does not explicitly exclude virtual schools from obtaining this grant money. There's no need for Hoosier taxpayers to subsidize training of a teacher who doesn't even interface with students face-to-face. And then last, the three requirements that we're placing on the teachers for this program, you may notice in the original bill that the list includes if the teacher is undergoing disciplinary action or a criminal investigation. Those are really good things, and I thank Representative Lucas for including those. But we'd also like to see them be able to pass an NICS background check, have not been convicted of a violent crime, including domestic violence, and have not illegally possessed a firearm in the past. That would That would be pretty hypocritical if we allow a domestic abuser who may be a teacher to include carrying a firearm on them day to day. Last, the fiscal note shows that the current balance of the Safe Schools Fund is $1.84 million. Estimating that the average course costs about $600, according also to the fiscal note, would mean that only about 5% of Indiana personnel, educators rather, would be able to participate. So this bill, at its very least, on the other end, does not include enough of the population to have very much of a substantive impact. And furthermore, I just want to hit on one important point. It's that any monies that are used for this training program are dollar for dollar being taken away from mental health providers in our schools. If you think about that, tapping into this Safe Schools Fund, dollar for dollar, is going to be taking away from mental health resource officers, and that's, as a body, I know 2 weeks ago that was something that we were absolutely against depleting any of that money, and against and for making sure that our kids have strong mental health access in their schools. So a few counter-arguments appeared evident when I was going through my amendment. The first was that the first part of my amendment would appear to be an unfunded mandate. It would appear that it requires training, and that training is not funded by eliminating access to the Indiana Safe Schools Fund. But that training is really only required if the participant decides to pursue this program. So there is no way that this amendment can be twisted to be described as an unfunded mandate. Second, it could also be argued that the original bill limits the training program to local decision makers. So why should we give them, or why should we not give them the option? But the reality is that if I'm a teacher who opts out of the program, yet the teacher in the classroom next to me opts into the program, I have very limited individual agency and clearance in that situation for my rights as to practice teaching in a safe environment. Last, I do want to note that I'm not an anti-gun person. I've got my lifetime carry license, but I know that with that comes a higher standard of responsibility than those without one. It does not guarantee preferential treatment under the Constitution in any way. It holds me to a higher standard, and that's something that I'm stressing through this amendment today. So I urge your support of this amendment on the one-year anniversary of the Parkland tragedy so that we can safely dedicate our resources to mental health professionals instead of classroom commandos. Thank you.